Everybody, welcome to one more round of Josh Norris. Today I'm going to have a lot of fun. I'm very excited about this topic. Something my partner Eric, who's been on the show as my co-host several times, he and I are always talking about is personal growth, personal development, and specifically in today's time in the world where things are unseen, things are a little bit crazy. Businesses are starting to put their marketing dollars down. It's so important to say, hey, how can I get better? How can I become a better version of me? Because the reality is the version that you are today is not going to get you to the goals that you want tomorrow. That's just the reality of everything we are as humans. We got to be constantly evolving, learning, growing. And I'll never forget, you guys may remember this speech, and it was Matthew McConaughey. It was his first Oscar that he had won. And he's up there and he was talking about my hero. He said, my hero is the person I am in 10 years. And what he meant by that is that's the person I want to be, and I'm striving every day to get better to become that guy. And in 10 years, my hero is going to be the guy in 10 years. Now, some people might think, wow, how egotistical and arrogant is that? And some people might get the concept, but the concept is very simple. You're thinking about what you want to become and how you're getting better on a daily basis. So what I want to do today is talk something about, to me, something that's been very important, which is books. There's so many things in books that are out there that can help you learn little things. And one book can only lead you to one idea, but that idea can lead you to take an action that could be a new business venture. It could mean more sales in your current job. It could mean thinking about something differently if you're more on like the construction side or you're in the trades. So I'm just going to run through a bunch of different books and talk to you about one thing I learned. Now, I want you to, if you hear a book that is interesting to you in here, all you got to do, email jnorris@brandendo.com. It's my personal email. I will send you a copy for free. All I need you to do, shoot me an email. I want a copy of this book and your address. That's all that's needed. I will send you a copy. So with that, let's go ahead and get kicked off. So the first one, this book's called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. I read this maybe 5 or 6 years ago. One of my good friends, Danny, had mentioned this book to me. And if you've ever owned a business of any sort before, this is a great one because it'll take you through the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, and it'll give you some tools and some tactics that can help you. I like it because Darren Hardy has got a very good way of telling stories and relating them back to principles. But there's also a lot of tactical information in this. Darren Hardy also has Darren Daily that's completely free to sign up for. And it's like 3 or 4 minutes a day where he gives a specific topic with the story that can be encouraging, it can be actionable. It's good stuff. So, Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. Next one is one of my favorites. Now, I love biographies because, well, I should say autobiographies. I love it when the author is writing about themselves and their life and the things that they were going through. One book I don't have here, and I'll go into this one in a second, is a book called Open. Open is one of my favorite books. It's written by Andre Agassi. And the neat thing about that is he starts the book, and if you don't know who Andre Agassi is, he's one of the greatest tennis players of all time, probably top 10, top 15 of all time. And he starts the book with, I hate tennis, which obviously captures you in like, wow, this amazing tennis player hates tennis. What does he mean by this? Well, he had that ability to recount every day of his life and everything that happened in those days. So he can tell with a picture-perfect memory what happened in every match, emotions he was experiencing when he went pro, when people were going against him. And what's nice is, what I like about autobiographies is you can relate to those emotional situations that people go through and tie them to things that you're going through in your life. And how did they get through that? Even though they're not exactly the same, the emotion's the same. So with that, I love Leading with the Heart by Coach Krzyzewski. This is a very tactical book on leadership, and it's how to lead a team, how to lead yourself, personal discipline. So Coach K, a lot of people don't know this, he was a coach for 50 years. He's winningest coach of all time in college basketball, but he went to West Point, and at West Point, his coach was none other than Bobby Knight. Bobby Knight is also one of the greatest college coaches of all time, and he was coached and mentored directly by Bobby Knight. So he talks a little bit about that, his championships, teams, specific players that if you're a Duke fan, you know, the Grant Hills, the Christian Leitners of the J.J. Reddicks, and he talks about stories with all of them, how he helped them get through certain things in their lives. Fascinating. So the next one is my boy Lute Olson. If you are here and you're an ASU fan, you don't like this guy because, you know, he won championships at U of A and ASU did not win any basketball championships, just to put that out there. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great book about his life and how he started coaching in Iowa, came out here, the types of teammates that he would recruit, how he strategically did the recruiting, what he looked for, and filling in pieces. It's not all just talent. It's how do they show up? What's their attitude? Fantastic book. Lots of great stories if you're into basketball. So moving on. The Purpose-Driven Life. If you were around in 2000, I think it was 2010, 2012, something like that, every human on the planet, I feel like, bought this book, The Purpose-Driven Life. And the neatest thing is it's, you know, it's broken up into 3 different sections. And, you know, when you go into this book, it talks about why are you here, God's plan for your life. And by the way, if you're not religious, you're not a Christian, that doesn't matter. It's still a good book. I have some in here. I don't mean to offend anybody. I'm coming from my framework and the way I see things. But it's a fantastic book. And the first thing it talks about in this book is it's not about you, which is a hard concept for a lot of people to think about. It's about the people that are around you. It's about what you can do for them and fulfilling a purpose and a mission for your life. And I believe that is something God ordained. Fantastic book. A lot of good nuggets here. The next one is a newer one, right? So if you know who Ed Mylett is one of the mentors I follow. He is part of the Arete Syndicate, him and Andy Frisella. He wrote a book called The Power of One More. I'm going to reference a book that I'll get to a little bit later, but Think and Grow Rich was one of the greatest books. That's this one here, and I'm going to give it its own time. But this is almost like a modern day Think and Grow Rich. A lot of the principles are the same, but the stories are different, the delivery is different. Ed is a fantastic communicator and arguably one of the greatest speakers of today's time. And he would say he's probably the best. I would agree with him, but you've got to put Tony Robbins in that. But this book is fantastic. It's very actionable, and it's all about, you know, doing one more rep, doing one more thing in your life that's going to get you that result. And you know what? Resonated with me because guess what? Our podcast is called One More Round, right? So one more round and you don't know that you don't think you can, that's going to make all the difference in your life. So check this one out. All right. We're going old school here. This book was written in the 50s, The Magic of Thinking Big. Anybody that is in the success world, the business world, that you ask about a book, I guarantee if they're over the age of 40, or in my case, I'm barely under the age of 40, they're going to reference Magic of Thinking Big. And I'll tell you my story was when I was young, was naive, was 19, I was getting into Amway. And my mentor at the time, I told him I didn't like to read. I had read one book in high school, throughout high school, and I had a lot of friends that helped me with the other books and all that stuff. But it was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a Jack Nicholson movie, and it's great. But he said, okay, you don't like to read? Well, I'm going to give you this, and reading and developing yourself is going to be extremely important if you want to be successful, is what he told me. And of course I did. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to make a good name for my family. I wanted to make a good name for myself. You know, I wanted what we all want, right? So he says, since you're not a big reader, I want you to read 3 chapters. Chapter 2, chapter 12, chapter 13. First chapter that I read was chapter 2, and it was on excuse-itis, which I pronounce excusitis because I had never heard the word, and it's not a word, by the way. But I embarrassingly said excusitis in a meeting one time. But anyway, it was talking about don't make excuses that you're too old, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough time. These are excuses people use to justify why they are not where they want to be, and they're not going to where they want to go, right? So The Magic of Thinking Big is a fantastic book, and it's about expanding your mindset and really understanding that there's a lot more than you have, but you got to think big and don't limit yourself. So check this one out. The next one, now I'm going to tell you, this one here weirded me out just a little bit when it was first given to me or recommended to me to read, and it's called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. if you're like me, I do talk to myself. That's just a reality. And people are like, oh, well, do you answer yourself? And I joke, of course I do. And that dialogue happens for all of us. Usually it happens in our head. We're not like talking out loud. Sometimes you do. But the whole purpose of this book is this is actually a PhD, and what he found was that people could reprogram their mind with the words that they speak. And he actually went as far as recording things, and he gives an example in the book of when he wanted to lose weight and wanted to take off 20 pounds. He reprogrammed himself to have a different relationship with food, a different relationship with fitness. You know, I am fit. I wake up every morning and I run for 2 miles. I watch what I eat. I don't overeat. Food is fuel. Food is not just for pleasure and comfort. So those types of things, he started to reprogram his mind, and he was able to lose 20 pounds. But also from a business perspective, there's a lot of business people in here that he helped reprogram their mind for success. And a lot of the things that were holding them back were literally self-sabotage of things they believed about themselves that weren't necessarily true, but they adopted through experiences, through their youth, all that kind of stuff. Great book. Now, on the same vein, but more in the faith sector, Hung by the Tongue. And one of the things it says in here is you're snared by the words of your mouth. All that means is the things that you speak, you are creating. And it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. The reality is, I'm sure you've heard people say that you can't put words back into a jar, right? Once you've said them, they're out forever. Well, this talks about that and being cautious with what you're saying about yourself. I know a lot of people are very self-deprecating in the way they talk about themselves. Oh, I could never do that, or oh, I'm not good at that. And they're trying to have this false humility. Well, why not be like, you know what? For me, I'm really good at marketing. I love fitness. I'm very strong. I have a lot of energy. And you talk good, not only about yourself. Talk about your spouse on who you want them to be, not necessarily something that they're doing incorrectly. You know, talk about them in a positive manner. Talk about your kids in a positive manner, because what happens when you say the good things, you know, you put it out in the universe, well, good things start to come back. So be very careful on the things that you're saying. Hung by the Tongue, it's like 100 pages. I don't care what your religious belief is. You can read this and get some good nuggets out of it. All right. This is one of the granddaddies of all the books. How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book has so many good things, and I think I've read it 3 times. If you were to see here, you see a whole bunch of highlights in there. This one, I will just boil down to one thing. One of the most important things I use to this day is that the most important person to somebody else is themselves. So when you're having a conversation and you were talking to somebody, think about asking them questions. Think about getting to know them and what they want, what their desires are. Because whether or not they reciprocate and they ask you those questions, by the time you're done talking to them, you're going to be one of the best conversationalists they've ever met. Why? Because you talked about the most important topic to them, themselves. So Dale talks about that, talks about public speaking in here and how important that is, and all kinds of other principles of being excellent with people. Because no matter what business you're in, whether you own your own business, whether you're working in a business, one common denominator is we all work with people. So if you can have a better experience with those people, you can have a better life. Great book. Kind of in the same vein, also one of my favorites, Bringing Out the Best in People. This one here is all about bringing out the best in other people around you from a leadership standpoint. One of my favorite stories in here, and I'll give you this. It was when J.P. Morgan happened to be at this loading dock of this warehouse, and they had these, basically they had to have this certain amount of loads that they did on each shift. They had a day shift and a night shift. And the production was down, so he was called in, he wanted to see what was going on, walks into the warehouse, and they had this chalkboard. And on the chalkboard, he asked the daytime supervisor, hey, how many units did you guys pack? And they said, 50. Writes 50 on the chalkboard. The evening crew comes in, the evening supervisor said, hey, what's that number up there? Oh, that's how many units the daytime did. Oh, okay. Well, the next morning, guess what happened? That number was erased, and it said 51. And then the daytime came in, they saw that this was erased, and the next day, it was erased when the nighttime came in, and it was 55. What happened was they doubled their production within 60 days. And all it was creating a competition and a camaraderie between two teams and giving them a goal to go after. Those are the types of things you learn in this book. The next one is something I think everybody can relate to, and it's called Acres of Diamonds. This is a very short book. It's 52 pages, and it's tiny. It's tinier than my hand, right? But this one here is great because it's going to talk about not stopping when things get hard, because sometimes you're just right there before you actually hit the diamond mine that this gentleman in this book, and I won't ruin it for you, but let's just say he didn't get it and somebody else got the reward because he stopped short. And when things were hard, he went a different direction. So this is a very good one. This book here by Larry Diangi, I read, called The Magic is in the Extra Mile. I read this when I was 19 years old. It was one of the first books after The Magic of Thinking Big. And in fact, there's magic in the title, maybe, like Coloring for Dummies or something. I'm not sure. But a lot of good information in this, and really it's about going that extra mile. It's very similar to Acres of Diamonds. Not just going 1 mile for somebody, but going 2. My business is marketing. It's making sure that the customers that we work with are getting good quality leads, they're closing business, it's getting them a return on investment from what they're investing with us. And a lot of times that's doing things that are outside of the contract, outside of the agreement. It's shooting them a text. It's a call that's outside of something you have scheduled. It's looking through the reports and making sure that they're getting a good ROI before you meet with them so that you're not just waiting for a problem to arise. By going that extra mile, for us anyway, we have people that stay with us for many, 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 many years and continue to do that. But that's the extra mile mentality. And this book here helped with it. It's an excellent storybook, lots of fun stories in there. So it's easy not to get bored with. Another book that I really enjoyed when I was about 19, 20, and it was The Servant. This here talked about servant leadership, which I had never heard of at this point in time. I was young, and now today it's very popular. But what it means is, and he was talking about Jesus, is, hey, Jesus was a servant to the people that he was around. He didn't have them serve him. He was the one washing their feet and doing these types of things that everybody would expect for him to do, or for them to do to him. Well, he didn't see it that way. He wanted to be a servant leader. So this gentleman who's in corporate America ends up going to a monastery, and he learns these principles about servant leadership so that he can get all the things he thinks he wants in his career, but through the process he realizes that becoming a servant leader, he gets a lot more value from his life than just the rewards of it. So, very fun book. It's a story-based book. So in here, I'm not gonna lie, I literally got sold on an infomercial. You remember this dude? Yeah. So he was on a ton of infomercials. Like him or not, this book is really cool, and I'm going to tell you right now, I did not read this entire book. I read maybe about 100 pages of it. But the one thing I learned from it was called a pegging system, and how your brain works is you can create a pegging system. So for example, I have this list that I memorized. So it's 1 gun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 car, 5 glove, 6 is a trick, 7 goes to heaven, 8 is a gate, 9 is a cat, 10 bowling pins. Okay, so now you have an idea of 10. If I wanted to go to the grocery store and I wanted to remember 10 things, I can literally peg those 10 things to things I need at the grocery store. 1 gun. Well, let's say I needed to buy some toilet paper. I can literally picture a gun shooting a thing of toilet paper, and I'm going to remember that. 2, shoe. If I need cherries, maybe I have a cherry in my shoe and I picture it like squishing. Ugh, it's gross, but I'm not going to forget that. So you can peg things in your mind to help your memory, and there's a lot of other cool things that you can do in this, but this book was fun. I don't recommend reading the entire thing, but there are some really applicable things in there. I'm going to skip this one for now. We'll come back to that at the end. It's kind of fun. But let's go to Napoleon Hill. This is what a lot of people consider the OG of self-development, and his story is he met Andrew Carnegie back, I think it was in the 20s. And Andrew Carnegie had this thing in his mind that he wanted to understand what all successful people did, boil it down, and actually have applicable things that anybody could apply these principles. So he had met Napoleon Hill, who was a writer, a very good writer, and he approached him on doing this project with him. This project was going to be multiple years long, and he said to Napoleon Hill, I would like to know if you want to take on this project. And what Napoleon Hill didn't know at this time was Andrew Carnegie had his hand behind his back and he was counting to 10, or hands I should say. You can't do that with one hand. And if he didn't answer before the time it came to 10, he wasn't going to let him do this project. Napoleon Hill obviously said yes. He created a book called Laws of Success, Master Key to Riches, Think and Grow Rich, one called Outwitting the Devil that they actually didn't even allow him to release till 80 years later. It's also one of the most relevant books I've ever read in my life. Read it last year for the first time. So this is great because these are applicable principles that you can apply, and you can read every couple of years and you'll be in a different place in your life and you'll get something new from it. So these are staples right here. And just to give you an idea, talked about how I highlight everything. You'll see lots of highlights in there. Make sure you're highlighting your books. You don't need to give these out to somebody else, so use a pen, use a highlighter so that you're getting things that you can reference back. And again, in 2 years, you're going to get something even else out of the thought that you had at the time. The next one is a book, and this is a marketing book. It's a very good one. It's called Influence, and this is how we as people are influenced. This guy, he's a professor. His name's Cialdini. He's a professor at ASU, and he boiled down the different things that influence us to buy, influence us in advertising, and it's fascinating. Things like scarcity. I'm sure you've seen it. There's only so many left on this offer. Well, that's a tactic that's used. You can do things that show you comparisons of one to another so that people are looking at what's being compared and they're going to see obviously a greater value, and that's how they sell things. So this book, if you want a tactical book on influencing, this is a good one. All right, then we got Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. Now, I believe tremendously that having a positive mental attitude is very important. This does not mean you need to be Pollyanna, that you need to ignore circumstances when things are going bad. What it means is you can control your brain when things are going bad to have the best mental state you can. I'm going to tell you, the last couple of months, I've had some things happen to me. Some people accuse me of things that were absolutely false. But rather than me getting pissed off and wanting to choke them, which can be a natural tendency for all of us, I'm like, no, I know this is going to work out. I know that I can support anything that I need to, and at the end of the day, I'm going to be vindicated. Well, and of course I was. But had I not had a positive attitude, I might have been angry. I might have let an emotion do something that would have been stupid that I couldn't take back, right? So positive mental attitude is also about believing that tomorrow is going to be better than today, and that your best days are ahead of you, not behind you. So that's an important thought process because we all want to believe that we have better days ahead. There's always going to be turbulence. There's always going to be things that come at you. But when you have a PMA, positive mental attitude, life is just much, much better. Think about the most positive people that you have in your life. It could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a business associate, somebody who works for you, somebody you work for. Think about that person right now, and what do they have in common? Probably positive mental attitude. I mean, let's face it, nobody wants to be around a bunch of people that think life sucks. This one here is a personal favorite of lots of people, certainly myself. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Robert Kiyosaki, one of the best writers in business, simple business books. He did this, Cash Flow Quadrant, a whole bunch of others. But what I love about this is it talks about mentorship, who you listen to. And he had a father that was a teacher, and he did pretty good. He made some money, but he also had his best friend's dad, who was an entrepreneur, who was able to succeed at a highly different level. And he was not an employee, didn't have a fixed income, also didn't have a guaranteed income. So he was out there building, creating, was a multi-millionaire, and he taught the principles of Robert Kiyosaki about what you have to do to be rich in this country, the things that you have to look at, and you have to do differently than an employee. So in my life, I have those types of mentors in my life that have helped me see things different, helped me get past that hourly wage mentality that I used to have years, 15 years ago before I owned my own company, and have been able to help me succeed and get through things that they've been through. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad is huge, all about who you listen to. Eat That Frog. So Eat That Frog is a very fun one, simple book, but what it means is that you take on the most important task in the day first. You don't wait, and the reason it's called Eat That Frog is nobody wants to eat a frog. It's nasty. It's gross. However, you know you have to do it in this case. If you were paid $1 million to eat a frog, I'm sure you would. So you wake up in the morning, eat that frog, get it out of the way, and being very specific on how you prioritize your time, the tasks that you do. Another great book that pairs with this is going to be The Power List by Andy Frisella. And his whole thing is you say, here's the 5 things I want to accomplish. Not 10, not 7, not 50, 5 today. These are the most important tasks I need to do. And you get those done, and no matter what, even if you don't do anything outside of that, you got those done, and that's a win. So Stacking Wins, Eat That Frog, very powerful book. The Go-Getter. Now this is one of my personal favorites of all time, because this is all about tying back into going the extra mile and really having a positive mental attitude and not letting circumstances get in your way. The gentleman in this book had one leg, he was a veteran, and he was chasing what's called the blue vase. The blue vase was literally something he was sent on a wild goose chase to get. He didn't know that he wasn't supposed to get it, but his journey in this, his attitude, and being what's called a blue vaser, after you read it you'll understand, is extremely important, because there's going to be a lot of circumstances and things that happen in life. And when you make sure that you don't let the circumstances get to you, this book here will help you have something to go back to and read. This book here, if you've ever sold anything, if you're in sales of any sorts, whether you own your own companies or you're just in sales, it doesn't matter. The Secrets of Closing a Sale. Right? This here has got, I think 270 pages and probably 100 different closes. Now, closing is not the most important part of any sale. I'm going to tell you that right now. A lot of people are like, oh, you got to close. Yeah, you got to close, but you also got to get opportunities. You also got to have a great product. Closing is just, once they realize it's a good product for them, getting them to say yes and moving forward with it. Well, that's where a lot of people struggle when they're in sales, is like getting them over the line. This here will give you so many different tactical things on how to get people over the line ethically and smart, rather than, you're not just selling something that people don't need. But this book is super good. One of my favorite closes is the puppy dog close that you can use in a lot of different ways. And what this is if you had a kid come into your pet store, they had a problem selling the pets. So what they said was, hey, why don't you take the puppy home for a day? And then just bring them back, if it doesn't work out. But just take them home, little test drive. And what happened was that pet store started selling every single puppy they sent home, because who wants a puppy that comes to your house, is fluffy and nice, and then you bond, and then you give them back? Nobody wants to do that. So it's called the puppy dog close, and you can do that. If you think about it, you can do it a lot of different ways. These are samples. These are things that maybe you sell. You can let somebody try for a while, and then they'll realize how much they actually needed it to begin with. But lots of good stuff in here. Now, this book here, I'm just going to say be careful on. 4-Hour Work Week. I read this back in 2010, and it took me on a whole different venture. But the story is, I had just injured myself playing basketball, and I was looking for ways I could make money from the couch, because I already left Gannett, I already started my company, and he talks about testing out a product. At the time, I was selling nutritional products on the side. So he talks about pay-per-click advertising and testing to see if you can sell these things online. I didn't know anything about Google PPC at the time, but I had nothing to do but sit on the couch with a laptop. I'm like, well, let's check this out. So I used the tactics that he had in this book to start. Eventually, I would sell $250,000 worth of stuff in the next 12 months online just from pay-per-click advertising. It was amazing. But then it talks about how, the 40-hour work week that a lot of people have in their minds, well, that was an arbitrary number put together at some point that people are tied to. You can do a lot more in less time than you really realize. So a lot of good stuff in this book. I will just say, don't take the title too seriously, because it's not that you're not going to be crazy successful in any life, in anything you do, in just 4 hours a week. But the principles are pretty strong in here. And this is Tim Ferriss. This is also Tim Ferriss. This is the last one. And this one here is fun because it's gigantic. He's written Tools of Titans. He's written several other books that are this big. But this one here, The 4-Hour Chef, really resonated with me because I wanted to be a chef growing up. And even though I went to culinary school all through high school, and I know quite a bit about it, so what I like about this is it allows you to learn cooking from the basic levels of understanding how to cook eggs, different ways to cook eggs, different equipment in your kitchen that you need, things that you don't need. This taught me about sous vide, which basically is a water bath for meat, vegetables, these types of things, so where you can't actually mess up the cooking. It talks about different methods, how to actually break apart poultry, how to use a knife, all the tactical skills. But he made this book for was to teach you how to learn things. And that's what I found fascinating, because although I'm learning about cooking, I'm learning principles I could tie to learning anything in this book. So that's the 4-hour work. Now that's the last, or the 4-hour chef. So that's the last thing that I had as far as book. Now I've read hundreds of books. There was one called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. I couldn't find on my bookshelf, but I love that one because one of the things I took out of that book talks about the power of enthusiasm. If you increase your enthusiasm, you will increase your results. Think about this in your life. When people around you are enthusiastic, you want to know about what they're doing. Why are they enthusiastic? Why are they excited about it, right? Well, if you're doing that, whether you're selling insurance, whether you're selling widgets, whether you're editing film and selling your next project, if you're enthusiastic about what you're doing and what you're selling, it will be conveyed and people are going to see that. So I hope some of this was helpful. Like I said, if there's a book, any one of these books that you want, all you got to do is email me at jnorris@brandindo.com. I'll buy you a copy. No big deal, no strings attached, because I want everybody to know that self-development, being the next better version of yourself, is an amazing thing. And I'll end with this. If you don't like reading, I understand that. 2 things that will help. Number 1, plan it around a time of your day you know that you're going to have to do every day no matter what. You're going to have to use a restroom every day. Okay? That's time that can be idle, sitting on your phone, or you read something. And you're going to go to bed every single day. So if you said, hey, 10 minutes before bed, I'm going to read before I hit the sack, also a great time. Build that habit, and what happens in even just 10 minutes over a year period of time, you probably read, even if you're not a great reader, you probably read 5 books, maybe 10, maybe 20. But now that 10 minutes has turned into a compound of information that you didn't have before. Also look at the audiobooks. I'm not saying supplement 100%, but audiobooks are great as well. I use Audible, and sometimes I'll even listen to the same book I'm reading, so I'm getting it from 2 different directions. So I hope this is helpful. If it was, hey, share this out with a friend that you know is into self-development or should be, and I hope to see a ton of people emailing me for books that they saw here that they would like. I appreciate you guys tuning in today. I look forward to seeing you next time.